Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the TheTahitiShow. I'm your host, Canary G, and tonight I want to talk about communication. This weekend brought some very interesting developments in terms of Black men and Black women communicating with each other, or I should really say the lack thereof. So today I want to talk about some do's and don'ts. Okay, all right. So let's jump right into this topic. So let's talk about some do's and let's talk about some don'ts. So first we're going to start with the don'ts. It's real easy to get caught up in your feelings and to just have an initial reaction to some type of stimulus. Maybe the person is saying something you don't like, maybe the person is doing something like, and 99% of the time, and that is a made up fact, not an actual statistical study. But the majority of the time, conflict arises because of a miscommunication or a misunderstanding of what someone was actually trying to say. And so what happens is we assume that we know what they're talking about. And then we have this very strong, very visceral, pervasive reaction. And we just react. And a lot of times, a lot of issues or a lot of fallout, fights, physical and otherwise, can be avoided if we just take the time to recognize that we're just assuming we understand what's really happening. So one of the first don'ts is to not assume. Do not assume that what you're feeling in that moment is exactly what the person is trying to convey and is exactly the issue that you may be taking up. It could be that you are hearing a certain message that that person is not necessarily communicating. It could be that that person is not thinking straight. It could be so many factors that contribute to your misunderstanding. So the first thing is don't assume. Take the time, ask questions, and make sure what you're hearing is exactly what the person is trying to convey. Also, don't assume that what the person is saying is not what they mean, which was the case in my particular circumstance. I was in having a friendly, jovial, what I thought was friendly, jovial conversation with someone turn into this like complete conflict, and he just shut the whole shit down without even really recognizing that he's actually assuming that what I'm saying is not what I mean to say, which is not what it was. So don't assume. Don't assume. So the next don't is don't only consider your perspective. You have, as an individual, however many moments that have shaped your life, that have shaped your consciousness, that has shaped your perspective, that has shaped your tendency towards pessimism or optimism. There are 86,400 seconds in one day. If you are over 30, imagine how many seconds that is. A second can change your life. We always hear about how a person's life changed in a split second. So imagine that for all of the seconds that make up the amount of time you've been walking this earth, all of that has shaped your perspective. All of your experiences, all of your trauma, all of your wins, who you are, your history, your ancestors, all these things shape who you are and how you think. But just like a fingerprint, your experience is only central to you. Another person's experience is only central to them. So there's no way that you can just jump right into a conversation, especially with someone you may not know that well, and think that your perspective on the situation is the same exact perspective they have on the situation and that you're accurate. So that's kind of being a little cocky. That might even be borderline manipulative. Um, so definitely consider the fact that your perspective may not be that person's same perspective. And especially when we start talking about male and female interactions, because we already know scientifically that men have a certain way of operating and thinking and viewing the world through your own biology and physiology. And the same is true for women. And a lot of times, the language that we use can get crossed because we just speak a little differently, or how we translate messages in our mind affect how we perceive things. And even all this dating advice that we have, you got to think like a man, act like a lady. You got, all the magazines. You got all your friends telling you things, parents telling you things. And it's like everybody's out here being a dating expert now. And and yet more single people are roaming the earth than ever before in the past, despite all this information we have on dating and love. And a lot of times it's very conflicting. And so it's very hard to be able to understand that just because this is your perspective, that other person shares the same perspective when you don't know all the details behind their message. So definitely do not only see your perspective and not consider the other person. The next don't. Do not have a hard conversation over text message. This is especially true if you don't know the person well. Communication, especially when it's something very emotional and it's something very charged, it's already difficult to do, even under the best circumstances, which is really in person and privacy in a calm setting. And being sober, might I just add that. It's already very difficult to communicate as it is. Then you throw in text message, which is now we're watering down the message. Now we got to try to figure out how to deliver a message in a way that's concise and clear, but and with the intent to try to convey, and to emote over text message, but you're already losing. There's already a filter that's filtering out some of the nonverbal cues that make it easier to understand what you're trying to convey. So that's one thing. Then you have no idea how that person is reading into it. And because you have no idea how the person is reading into it, you don't know if your message is really getting across or not getting across. So this whole text message got everybody screwed up. And it's one thing if you've been together, you've been in a relationship, or you've been friends, or you've been in whatever type of relationship it is. Maybe it's coworkers, family, friends, whatever, a spouse. When you know each other very well and you've been together for a long time and you know how the person thinks, you know how they interpret what you say, you know how to interpret what they are saying, then it's maybe a little easier. And a text message may be an effective way to help, or at least one of the ways in which you communicate with each other. But if you don't know the person, you are risking all types of miscommunications, misunderstandings, and then you're potentially ruining a relationship that could be very beneficial for you because you're not willing to pick up the phone or take a break and try to see the person, face to face, or find another means in which to communicate. So, I'm moving into a space where, and I'm a big texter. I love to text. I think it's super convenient. And then it's good because you can always refer back to a conversation. So I get it. I get why people do it. Sometimes it's easier than trying to have a full-on conversation, especially when you're talking about something that's emotional and you don't want to be emotional. I get that. But at the end of the day, like, these are people's lives. Like, this is not game time. Like, this is not the time to be playing with somebody's feelings. This is not the time to be, out here just running amok because you're afraid to have a face-to-face, heart-to-heart, whatever conversation with someone about how you're feeling about something. Especially when you don't even know the person and you don't know what they're saying and you're not understanding how they're hearing what you're saying and you got just miscommunication all over the place. Pick up the fucking phone and give somebody a call and have a conversation and don't assume and don't, not consider that person's perspective and all those things. So those are some don'ts. Now let's talk about what to do. So the obvious thing would be do the opposite of what the don'ts are. But let's be a little more specific and let's be a little more detailed about how to do the things you should do in communication. And again, this applies to all relationships, not just, a romantic relationship, but a family relationship, a relationship with a coworker, friends, etc. So the very first thing you must do is calm down. When you're dealing with a very emotionally charged circumstance, it's real easy to get hyped and just let loose. But this is where you have problems. This is where you say the things you don't mean to say. This is where you have not considered the other person's perspective. This is where you're assuming things that may or may not be true. And it could be true, but you don't want to go into it assuming it. You want to go into it being very clear-headed and very calm so that you can move on to the next do, which is to ask questions. So calm down first so that you're clear-headed and so that so that you can go into it with a very balanced and grounded energy so that you can have the most productive conversation possible. And then asking questions, which is the next do, that helps you to really have clarity. So when you're calm and you understand what's happening and you can be on the same page, asking questions helps you get to that point where you're on the same page. It makes it so that you have an opportunity to say to the other person what you think, and they have an opportunity to say what they think, and then you can find clarity and find yourselves on the same page so that you're on the same side of the sidewalk at the same time, walking in the same direction, rather than you going this way and they going that way and don't nobody know which way they going. So calm down. And once you calm down, ask questions. And that's another thing. When you start off the conversation, don't just jump into it in attack mode. You did this, you did that, you said this, you said that. When you go into it with a question, it doesn't mean it's not going to trigger an emotion in the other person that you're communicating with, but it does at least promote the idea that you're trying to understand and you're trying to get to the bottom of this situation. And that also doesn't mean to attack via a question. So for example, you don't want to say something like, yo, why did you do XYZ to me when I've done nothing to you? That's a question not asked in a proper way. A more effective way of asking a question, particularly in a conflict, would be to say something to the effect of, when XYZ happened the other day, it made me feel this way. And I just want to understand first if I'm reading into this inaccurately and maybe you meant something else. That's a way to kind of take the pressure off. You're not attacking and you are letting the person know that you want to be on the same page and that you don't want to come into it with an attack. So ask questions. This leads to the next point, which is choose your words deliberately. It's so easy to get swept up in your emotional reaction that you just say whatever because fuck it. It's like feeling these kind of negative emotions like like anger or irritation or pain, hurt, whatever, embarrassment, it's easy to walk into a situation and just drop bombs on the situation and just walk the fuck out. Like, that's very easy to do. But then you'll end up a very lonely person because people ain't trying to deal with that, especially as we get older, especially if you're looking for a romantic partner, especially if you're looking for a business partner or a friend. That's no way to fucking be, to just walk in and just be saying a bunch of shit because you feel some kind of way and then walking out. No, that's not how you handle a mature adult conversation. No, you choose your words deliberately. You make it clear what it is that you are experiencing and you apply the appropriate label to that. So that when you go into a conversation, you can say, this is how I feel, this is why I'm bothered, and this is where I would like to go. And you choose words that are empowering for the both of you. This is not the time to belittle somebody and just be like, oh, well, you made me feel like this, so you need to get the fuck away from me. Like, there are times when that's appropriate, but if this is a situation in which you're trying to build a type of connection or a relationship of some sort, you want to use language that is very clear, concise, and deliberate. And the thing is, even when we say hurtful things in the midst of an argument, that is very deliberate. It's the choice that we make in an argument to hurt another person. So even in those situations, we do it whether you recognize it or not. So if you want to resolve a conflict and you want to move forward, you still have to do the same thing. You have to choose your words deliberately, and you do it by first calming the fuck down. So calming down is the very first thing that you do in any communication. It sets the tone for you to be able to, go through these mental processes. So when you go into the conversation, it can be healthy and productive. So choose your words. Choose words, the right labels to convey the message you're trying to get across. And that means you can't rush through the conversation. This is why being on text may not, in some ways, can be good because you can take the time to really sit back and think. But then in some ways it's bad because you're trying to emote a message in a way that doesn't convey it as clearly as it would in real life or, face to face or over the phone. So the last point I want to make on the do is on what to do in a healthy communication is consider what you've said or done that led to the situation. So a lot of times it's very easy to blame the other person for why you feel the way you feel. It's very easy to react to what someone has done or said because and not understanding that they are reacting to you. So one thing to consider as well is, what have you done that's led to this communication or that's led to this conflict? Take some time to figure that out. And that might mean in your period of calming down, it might take longer than you think. It might not be that you just take 3 deep breaths and then go into the conversation. It might be that you have to sleep on it and take a day to really analyze the entire circumstances so that when you go into this conversation, you understand what the background is. In the case that in the case that's kind of sparking this episode, this person is accusing me and assuming that I'm not telling him what I really want, which is absolute false. And the actual fact is that I'm following his lead, but he don't know what he wants. And so because he doesn't know what he wants, I'm left to just wait. And in my waiting, I'm just living. And I made it clear what it was that I need in that exact moment. And not moment in terms of the conversation, but moment in terms of our overall interaction. I made it clear where I am, and I made it clear what I need. And I don't know. When I asked him the same questions, his response is that he doesn't know. So he's not really considering how my behavior is in response to his behavior. And because of that, and he's doing all the don'ts, basically, assuming, not considering my perspective, having, having the conversation over text message, and just not really considering that there's another person involved in this whole exchange. But that's neither here nor there. Ultimately, what you want to do is, when you're going into a situation, when you're going into a hard conversation, calm the fuck down first. So that might mean taking some deep breaths. That might mean, taking a break from the person for a couple hours, or that could mean, sleeping on it. It could even be longer than that. There are times when I've had to take days before coming back to a conversation. And that's hard to do on both ends, but it's better overall and in the long term. So calm down first. Ask questions. Don't assume. You have to ask questions so that you and the other person are on the same page. Choose your words deliberately so that you're not just reacting based on your emotional response. And consider what you have said or done that's led to the conversation or that's led to the conflict. All right, y'all. I'm about to get out of here. So, if you have any questions or comments on the topic, leave some comments below. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can find out when we have new episodes airing. And you could also find us online. You can find us on our website at TheTahitiShow at TheTahitiShow.com. You can also find us on social media at Instagram and on Twitter at TheTahitiShow. And you can also send us an email with your question at TheTahitiShow@gmail.com. All right, peace, family. Until we meet again. Bye-bye.